So I'm here in my room. My computer is turned on in front of me. I've got my microphone here. There's a notepad open with some notes about my podcast. It's time to rewind. It looks like they're open to the 29th scene of Memento that starts in color at 60 minutes and 8 seconds, with Leonard looking at a coaster with discount in written on it, and ends at 62 minutes and 38 seconds with the escort getting out of bed and shutting the bathroom door. There's also a Skype window open. Oh, hang on. Who is this?
Hi, Bubbawheat. It's your co-host, Eric Deutsch.
Oh, of course, I seem to have forgotten about you. And there's someone else here. Who is this?
And I'm the escort these guys requested to be here. I'm JD Duran from In Session Film.
So I guess Amazon escorts came through for me.
They did, yes. 1-800-ESCORTS. You'll find us there.
So once again, let's go ahead and just jump straight into this scene. I think it's interesting that like the fact that we have this scene at all, because I feel like it's almost painted as him, like as this is the first time that he's renting the room at the discount inn. But at this point, we already know that he's been staying here for at least a week, and that Bert has rented him a couple different rooms.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because he is taking the Polaroid that to this point in this movie, we've seen him carrying around, and we see him putting up the map. So, which means he's been carrying the map around too. So it's a bit unclear, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. That's real interesting. I mean, to me, this all seems very new to him in the sense that, well, everything's new. So maybe this is not a valid argument. I don't know. But, Nolan paints this as him experiencing this for the first time. At least I think that's what he's invoking. But again, maybe that's the sleight of hand of Nolan, right? Because what we first see is him parking the car, and he walks out and he takes a photo of the sign as if he's never seen this before. And I would think if he's been here before, he would have already had that on him and like known to see that photo before. So I guess that was kind of my interpretation of it. But given the context of the film and what we know of what you're saying there, I don't know. I guess there is some ambiguity to it, but that was kind of my interpretation of it based off of what we know about him and what the photos mean to him.
Yeah, I think, hearing you talk about it, it makes me think that it is almost like that sleight of hand, but also like the unreliability of memory, and the fact that it's basically him telling the audience as an unreliable narrator that this is the first time.
He very much is. Yes.
That this is the first time that he's staying at this inn. And I also wanted to point out a quick bit of trivia from the commentary. Whenever he parks the Jag, the car next to him is actually Christopher Nolan's car. I believe it's the white one that you can mostly see. He didn't specify which side, because there is a car on either side, but I'm guessing it's the one that you see very clearly. The white car rather than the corner of the blue one on the other side.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Pulling a Sam Raimi, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
And then we get another look at, his routine with him writing down the information on the back of the Polaroid and him setting up this map. And we can see it a little bit better this time, or at least we can see a different section, and we can definitely tell. Because we talked about this a little bit the first time we saw it, that it is clearly a map, because you can see that he has like street names written on there, and this time we can see the yellow dot for Ferdy's bar, because I guess he didn't take a picture of Ferdy's bar, and we see a picture of the photo lab the nearby photo lab, which apparently that must be where he gets his buys his Polaroid film.
Boy, that store
makes
must stay
sense.
in business solely based on him, huh?
Seriously, that in the tattoo shops.
And then the other thing that you can clearly see right below the discount in, there's an X and it says not this one with an arrow pointed down, and we can't see what the picture is. But like, what are your thoughts? What do you think is on that picture that says not this one?
I don't know. I've never really thought about that before. I don't know. You guys have any thoughts? Maybe something will come to me as we talk here.
I'm trying to find exactly where.
It's second 44.
Okay, see, not this one. Maybe there are 2 discount ins, and so he wants to make sure he doesn't go to the wrong one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe not another discount in, but maybe it's another motel that he had a bad experience in, and so he took a picture of it and wrote, like bed bugs. It's like not this one.
So the one on the map that's the one it's referring to. That's what you're saying?
Well, he has the shot focuses on him, pasting the Polaroid of the discount in that he just took, like right in the middle, and then right below that there's a not this one and an arrow pointing down, and you just see the top of the Polaroid, but you can't see what's on the picture.
Gotcha. Okay, I don't know. Interesting. I mean, with him, it could be a bajillion things. Yeah. I don't know. That's fascinating.
And this scene, like as a whole, it really feels like it's showing Leonard in a very dark place. And he sits down and he immediately goes to the escort section and picks the first one, the Amazon escorts. And I do think that it's really great the way that the cameraman has this in to where you can clearly see Amazon escorts, but all the numbers are blurry.
Yeah. This is good. This is, first of all, the fact that he's calling an escort in the yellow pages. It's just it's fascinating. All you youngins who are listening, yes, there used to be a book with all the phone numbers in them because there was no internet. It's clearly a big section of escorts because we only can see about the first 4 or 5 lists, and it's only in the A's and B's. So this town has a lot of escorts.
A lot of them.
But yeah, he goes for the first one. He's not interested in wasting time. He opens it up. He goes to escorts. First one, Amazon escorts. Boom. He calls them, and we see him talking to them. And he says in a very resigned way, "Yeah, okay, blonde's fine." And so obviously he wants someone who resembles his wife as much as possible. They obviously don't have the hair color he's looking for. They're selling him on a blonde, so he just accepts it. And it's interesting that he does that because, again, to the whole point of like he doesn't want to waste time, he could hang up and go to Amber or Bad Blondes or Bear Escorts. And just work his way down till he finds a place that has someone with the hair color that he wants. So it's interesting that he just would rather just take what this first one he calls has to offer.
And it would have been interesting to perhaps hear the other side of it, or if that wasn't the first thing they offered, what if she or he, whoever's on the other line, initially offered up, red or brown instead of blonde? Like, how does he react? Like, does he wait for him to get through all the options before he's like, okay, yeah, blonde is fine? Like, it would have been maybe interesting to see him kind of cycle through all the options before landing on that. But that's clearly what he's looking for. To your point, either way, that is clearly what he's looking for. That was intentional on his end. And it is interesting that he goes to the first one and immediately dials it up. And you're right that while we can't see the numbers, you can make out the 555 and just.
Well, I think it's. I was looking at it and I think it could be 555, but I almost think it looks more like 888. But I think it could go either way. It's hard to tell because it is blurry. It
is blurry to your point. I assume 555 because at that time that was the Hollywood trope. Like that was the thing to do.
I mean,
Everything's 555.
It still is. I mean, 555 is
Yeah.
it's like reserved for Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I just assume it is, but it could be 888.
And it's also worth mentioning that again a little bit of trivia from the commentary that this is a complete dummy page. They didn't pull this from an actual.
Of course.
I never would have thought that it was a real page.
So that they don't have to worry about clearances.
Yeah.
For any real escort services.
Yeah, of course.
Now the thing is, so the escort shows up, and like I mentioned in the last scene, her face even resembles Georgia Fox a bit. But the thing is, it makes the fact that she looks so much like her called into question. And I think this could be the unreliable narrator coming here. He did not pick out this escort for her face. She was sent by the service based on his call. He did not know what this woman would look like when she showed up. So does this escort really just uncannily, in a coincidence, resemble his wife, or does Leonard just think she looks like that?
It's a good question. Honestly, it's a very good question. And because he is an unreliable narrator, I mean, I think you make a great point. I think there's a great argument to be made that she doesn't look anything like that, but what we're seeing is a reflection of him projecting. And that's why we see her that way. I would almost put money on that's really Nolan's intention here. Of course, he's never going to answer that for us. But if I had to guess, like that's probably where I'd put my money.
Yeah, I actually didn't really think about that myself, but yeah, I do kind of see that, and I could see it going either way. That this is like just a part of Leonard's memory as he's retelling this story to the audience. That it is, an unreliable memory. That she does kind of look like him, but the one thing that he can't change is the fact that she's blonde, because that's that was an important part of the phone conversation, and I do think that it's like you can't hear the other side of the phone conversation, but I'm almost certain that that the guy on the other end of the phone said, blondes have more fun, and have more fun. And that's whenever Leonard said, yeah, they do say that, or something along those lines.
Yep. And gentlemen prefer blondes is, of course.
Yeah. And what do you guys think about this scene as a whole? Because I do feel like I'm on the side that I almost think that this scene is not really necessary to the narrative as a whole, because the burning of his wife's things is very important, and this introducing this escort there, we do get a bit of the awkward humor as Leonard's explaining to her what he wants her to do, and she's trying to figure it out if it's some sort of sex thing. And I think it does speak a little bit to Leonard's overall sense of loneliness, but at the same time, he still can't get past the fact that to him his wife died basically yesterday. But I don't know, that this whole scene and this concept of him calling the escort feels kind of weird to me.
Here's why I think it is important. Because by the end of this scene, we now see what he's doing. He's recreating the night Catherine was killed. He's reliving that trauma. And so he is, in all caps, messed up. He really is really messed up with what's going on. And so I think it is important because it gives a real insight into what's going on in his head, that this man is so desperate to remember. He is choosing to relive the most traumatic night of his life. And I'm sure this is not the first time he's doing it either.
Well, and I think it's important as well because, and I briefly mentioned this when we were talking about scene 25, But I keep going back to that line in the film where he says, if we can't make memories, we can't heal, which I think is the thesis of this film in many ways. And I think this is him knowing that he can't create new memories. He has memories of this traumatic event, obviously. And I think this is him tangibly doing what he can to attempt to grieve, to try to heal, even though he can't create new memories. The one thing he does have control over is recreating this moment. And it's interesting because surely he could talk with someone through, what he experienced that night. But I think it's fascinating to see him choose to not discuss it verbally with anyone, but instead physically try to recreate that, what happens. And it certainly speaks to his psychological state here and how deeply involved he is with the trauma that he's grappling with. But on the surface, the scene does play out weird. You're absolutely right. There is this weird uncanniness to it based off of what he's asking this escort to do, and given the context of the film and what we know about him and his wife. But I think underneath is, again, this great subtlety, this subtle pathos that he's trying to grapple with this as tangibly as he can. Will it work or not? Who knows? Probably not, because as we talked about in scene 25, he talks about how he's tried this before and he can't remember to forget her. So he's done this before, but in his mind, this is his way of attempting to grieve and to cope and to try to find some sort of closure and healing by recreating the moment as tangibly as he can, which I find captivating. So like on the surface, it plays out awkwardly, but underneath I think there's this incredible emotion there that is consistent with 25 and scene 27, and what makes these trilogy of scenes, I just think, three of the best in the movie for me.
Yeah, and I do think that fits in with, especially like the look on Guy Pearce's face whenever he's on the phone. It's just this, that is the look of a completely defeated man, just with his eyes kind of half closed. He has like no energy, like he is just so defeated. And then like right after that, you have this like nervous, awkward energy as he's trying to explain what he wants the escort to do without fully going into his backstory.
Yeah. And of course, there's the moment as well that I think again is striking, where she picks up the brush and she's confused. This is weird. Why would you ask me to do this? And she picks up the brush and starts to kind of play with it. And he's like, no, like kind of has a freak out moment. It's like, I don't want you to use any of these items. I just want you to place them around the room.
Yeah, so I don't want a hooker's hair on my wife's brush.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it does speak to, again, how sentimental these items are. He just needs someone that's not him to pretend to be her. Just place him around the room. That's really all I need you to be, as he tries to, in my opinion, I think he's trying to cope.
Mm-hmm. And I also think it's kind of weird that they have the addition. There's the addition of the bra that we didn't see in either of the two previous scenes, and I almost feel like that was added there just for the bit of playful humor where she asks if he wants her to wear it.
Yeah, I mean, she's incredulous that he doesn't want anything remotely sexual, but there's no way this is the weirdest thing she's ever been asked to do. There's just no way.
Which is probably why she does coke. How else do you react to this situation?
Yeah, and then I do, once again, want to bring up the Christopher Nolan commentary, because he does talk about that, and he does mention that a lot of people had questioned him about the inclusion of this scene, and he said that several people thought that this feels like something that could have been cut out of the film, but to him, he feels like it was important to show an example of past Leonard orchestrating this scene for future Leonard to find himself in.
I think it adds further context. I mean, it's one thing to see the items in the room in scene 27, knowing what is about to take place with those items. That in and of itself, certainly some great texture there. But I think this added context of him asking this escort, this stranger, to essentially pretend to be his wife and to carry these items around the room and place them around the room as if his wife was there. To me, that adds so much great context to why in scene 27 he rolls over and tries to embrace this ghostly presence that he thinks is there. Why those items do mean something to him when Nolan cues us into it. Like I certainly add some weirdness to it for sure, but I think underneath that, those oddities is that emotion. And it starts off maybe a little bit more subtle in 29, but I think it comes through quite palpably in 27 and 25. But I think that context I think it adds a lot. I think it should be here.
Yeah, and one other thing that he mentioned is he felt like this was a very concrete example of the audience reassessing the scene, like the previous color scene.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it adds, a very different context of the, scene 27.
Yeah. Oh, it does. Completely recontextualizes it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it ends. I think it's kind of funny that, in the conversation, he asks her to slam the door after he falls asleep. But the sound Foley, it doesn't sound like she slams the door. To me, it sounds like she just kind of shuts it normally.
Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a thud, but nothing that would wake him up necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, gives her time to break out her substances and maybe that gives him time to sleep a little bit. Maybe that's partially why he's so groggy, is that he actually did lay there for a while. He never did wake up to the door slamming.
Yeah, well, one note that I think I skipped over in the previous scene, because I realized that you don't actually see the clock in this scene, but at the end of the last scene, you do see what time it is on the clock, and you do hear you can hear the ticking of the clock. So you can tell that he is keeping the batteries fresh, and he is actively keeping time with the clock. It's not just a prop. It is, he's keeping it in working condition.
Yeah.
But the time that he wakes up is 2:30 in the morning. So I'm guessing that I think that adds a little bit of context, and I feel like that's a time that makes sense for the context of this scene, because I feel like he probably called the escort service like around midnight. And so that was maybe the only one that they had left at that time.
If I'm not mistaken, he tells her that, hey, wait for me to fall asleep and then go into the bathroom and slam the door shut, which I assume that unless they're going to bed at 2:00 in the morning, if he's falling asleep around midnight or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, then there's a 2-hour gap there where he truly is there sleeping and she's waiting for him to wake up. So, I mean, I don't know, but that's interesting to consider, I guess.
I was just going to say that he's definitely not calling the escort service at midnight because it's light outside when he's on the phone with them.
Daytime.
So he might have, maybe he set it up for her to show up at midnight. That's certainly a possibility.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Or do you think that maybe she came over and do you think, what do you think happened between the time where he's, going through this awkward description of what he wants her to do? Like, do you think that he just immediately goes to sleep? Do you think that they, spend some time talking? How do you see the events happening? Or do you think that he just literally just goes to sleep, or just ignores her? What do you think?
I think he goes straight to sleep because much like he went straight to the first listing in the yellow pages. He's not interested in wasting time. I think he's not interested in wasting time. He wants to get to it.
That's what I would guess as well, that he tells her what he wants, because it's not even like, and you're right. He immediately goes to, the first one there in the phone book, but like he's pretty adamant about what he wants, as weird as it is. Again, when she starts asking about the bra, he's immediately, no, I don't need you to do anything. I don't need you to put the brush to your hair. I just want you to place the stuff around the room so we can do this. So, I mean, if assuming that he's consistent in that, but again, as we've talked about many times, he is a little bit of an unreliable narrator. So who knows? But I think the consistent progression, and given what this scene really is, what he's really doing in terms of trying to cope, and he's thinking about his wife through all of this, that I think, it makes sense to me that he asks her to do that. She does. They immediately go to bed. That's, I think, what it's inferring.
Yeah, I'm on board. I think that makes sense, especially with everything else that we've talked about in this scene. And then that ends my notes for this scene. Do either of you have anything that you wanted to say about this scene?
The only thing I was going to say was, and one of you said it in the last scene. I forget which one of you it was, but this is once again, we have another scene where much like earlier in the movie with Natalie, we're led to believe he has sex with a woman, but he did not when we find out in the next scene.
Yeah. Because her one line in the last scene was it good for you, which implies that they had sex, and then we see this scene, and clearly they did not have any sex.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, to speak to the performances, I mean, Guy Pearce is a master, but credit to Kimberly Campbell as well, because she only has a brief exchange with Leonard in the previous scene. She has a little bit more to do in this one, and I like how playful she is initially, because she doesn't know what's going on, and she's like, do you want me to wear this bra? She grabs the brush and puts, like, she thinks that he's asking her to kind of play this up a little bit, like it's some sort of kink, not knowing the context of what these items mean emotionally to him.
Yeah.
And I think she plays that up very well, like that kind of confusion, and also the awkwardness of it when he's like, no, I just want you to place these around the room. Her reaction is just like, okay, if that's what you want. Like it's a nice little moment of performance that adds credence to the character, I think.
Yeah, and this is JD. This is your last episode here with us. I did want to ask you a question, and then I will give you a little bit of time if you want to talk. If there's any other scene or moment in the movie that you wanted to talk about. But I do want to ask you, because at the end of this film, Teddy basically implies that the Sammy Jenkins story was actually about Leonard himself, and that it was his wife that had diabetes, and it was actually him that gave his wife the injections that put her into a coma. Who do you think is the more truthful? Like, do you think that Teddy is correct in that story, or do you think Leonard, or do you think it doesn't matter?
I don't. That's a really good question. I think maybe it matters a little bit, depending on how much you want to root for Leonard here, because there is much about him that is unreliable. I think some of the brilliance of this film, in terms of Nolan's storytelling, is that as scenes play out initially, there are characters that he interacts with that we don't trust, right?
Yeah, you can't trust anybody in this.
Yeah,
you can't trust a single character, and everyone is different levels of being unreliable and untrustworthy.
100%. But then as we gain further context, as we dive further into the psychology of this film, I think you start to question Leonard as much as you question the other characters, because I think about that scene with Natalie when she is provoking him to hit her. Initially, that scene plays out as like, man, she's being really antagonistic. and abrasive. So we find her off-putting. But in context of the film, what we come to see is that Leonard had stolen her boyfriend's identity. And so like there's an argument to be made that what she was doing in retaliation wasn't nearly as abrasive as we thought it was. Manipulative for sure because of Leonard's condition. But I think it's interesting, like, there's as much blame to Leonard as there is Natalie. And also with the full context of Leonard on the whole, again, he's certainly being manipulated by players around him, but you think about some of the choices he makes and how, violent he's really been over these last few years as well. And so it's not as black and white as it might seem on an initial viewing, which is what I really love about how this film plays out. And then you add in what you're talking about as far as, these flashbacks or these, external scenes with Sammy and what that really represents. I think like there's a level to it that I want to buy what's happening there, given the uneven nature of Leonard and how that plays out throughout the film. That, he had this accident. He couldn't really, he couldn't create these new memories. The condition was real. And as his wife tried to find answers and solutions, he just gave her what he wanted until he fails that final test. And I think that helps explain a lot of the guilt he's feeling, not just the grief of losing his wife, but he's also feeling quite guilty. And I believe you mentioned, I forget which scene we were talking about, but how he's pointing the finger at himself, like he's harming himself as much as he's trying to harm others that he thinks, hurt his wife. Which adds some great irony, right? Because he's trying to get revenge for the person that killed his wife, and really he should just be pointing the gun at himself, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so like him kind of inflicting pain and torture on himself, such as recreating the trauma as he does, I think that gives credence to the whole Sammy theory, that it really is him and that it is true. But the ambiguity is great, and that's what I love with Nolan. He's very good at that stuff.
Yeah, there's so much about this, with Natalie's arc is a great example, and we've already talked about some of Natalie's arc, and we still have more to go with her, and that's a fascinating thing to see played out in this chronology.
Yeah.
But once again, I like to thank you. Was there anything else in the movie that you wanted to touch on before we let you go?
No, I mean, I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of these episodes and as you guys break down. I mean, because there's so much to peel apart, and obviously because of the scenes we focused on, we didn't talk too much about Natalie or the Sammy stuff. Or Teddy. I'm curious to hear you guys break down a lot of that, because I do think that the Teddy character here is really quite fascinating. I love the dynamic between him and Leonard throughout the film is really great. And some of the stuff that Teddy's willing to reveal to Leonard, and the irony of Leonard not wanting to believe anything. I mean, that's obviously something we see on that Polaroid quite a few times throughout the film. And similarly to the Sammy thing, like there's credence to what Teddy is saying. And so like there's such a great duality with everything with this film. And it really does take multiple viewings to really consider it all and kind of analyze it. So yeah, it's just one of those movies that will grow on you over time and on rewatches. And honestly, to this day, I still think it's one of Nolan's best.
Yeah.
Really, really great film.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with this for these past 3 weeks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
And for the last time, why don't you go ahead and take a moment to let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yep. So you can find us in sessionfilm.com. We have the podcast that we do every week, which comes with a main show where we cover a variety of film topics. We have podcast reviews that come out throughout the week as well. And we have written content. So if you want to read reviews, analysis, all kinds of fun stuff. We have a great team of writers, and you can find links to everything, socials as well, links to the podcast. All of that is at InSessionFilm.com. And thanks, guys, for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this quite a bit.
Glad to have you.
Yeah,
and,
great to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks, as always, Eric, for joining me as my co-host here.
Always have fun.
And as always, you can find me. I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook page, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. You can join that and discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have any sort of discussions about time loop movies or TV shows. Anything is welcome there. And until next time, have I told you about Memento?
Only every time I see you.
Yeah, okay. Blonde's fine. Well, that's what they say.